Welcome to First Parish in Framingham. We are a welcoming congregation. So whoever you are, whomever you love, and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We welcome you here however you are joining us during this time of worship, whether you're here in the meeting house or whenever you might be watching this service in the future or online. My name is Rupal Bhatt. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm serving as your worship associate this morning. Be sure to read the announcements in the order of service. There are many activities happening after worship. Immediately following worship, you're invited to join us for social time in Scott Hall, which is just across the courtyard here. Please take a moment now to turn your phones or other devices to their quietest settings. While electronic noises can be distracting, we welcome your human noises, especially the sound of your singing and your laughter. So please join in. This service is a service for all ages. We welcome your gentle movements and your participation. Since 1701, people have gathered as this community to rest or recharge, to be challenged or affirmed. Those people are like you. You belong here, maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. We're happy to have you with us.
Beloveds, enter into this space made holy by our presence. Enter into this hour made holy by our intention. Come as you are. Be as you need to be. We are here in community. So let us worship together.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. We kindle the flame of our faith in the cup of our covenant. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our first hymn this morning, number 33, Sovereign and Transforming Grace. You are invited to remain standing as we sing and speak our affirmations. The words are in your order of service.
Good morning, friends. Good morning. How are we doing? Some thumbs up? Wow, there's a lot of thumbs up. It's okay if you're not at a thumbs up. That's very legitimate too. Well, you may have seen the rumor that is circulating that I love labyrinths. Louise loves labyrinths. That is a deep and dear spiritual practice of mine. And I would love to tell you more about that and engage in a little activity. So does anybody know what a labyrinth is? Anybody ever walked a labyrinth? Maybe done a finger labyrinth? Anyone want to explain labyrinth? 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 It's a maze. In and out. You have to find your way to the center. In a labyrinth, are there wrong paths you can take? No. Yes? No? It depends if there's a minotaur in there. So sometimes labyrinth is used in, there's different meanings of the word labyrinth, and sometimes it is kind of code for a super secret path where there's wrong turns and all sorts of things. But the kind of labyrinths that I love don't have any wrong turns. It's a winding path along either, sometimes there's like labyrinths you can walk. Sometimes there's finger labyrinths that you kind of do with your hand. I mean, like a piece of clay. There's a lot of different types of labyrinths. So my passion for labyrinths came when I was really young. The church camp that I grew up going to had a labyrinth in the woods. And I would walk it. And it was one of the first places that I realized that I didn't have to be perfect. And I felt really deeply connected to the earth. And I felt that the earth would hold me, and it was this really powerful experience of knowing that I am whole, I am with the earth is whole, and it was deeply connective and meditative for me. I had another experience, super early pandemic. I was living with my parents, and I grew up on a dead-end street, and so I drew a big labyrinth in chalk on our road, and it was really fun. Sometimes we'd see neighbors out on their COVID walks, and they'd be going over the labyrinth. They're kind of looking at the labyrinth like, who are these silly neighbors with the chalk labyrinth on the streets? But it was very fun and dear. But sometimes you don't have your pocket finger labyrinth, and sometimes you don't have a labyrinth you can just walk. I know we have a labyrinth here. Maybe we'll do that someday together. But sometimes you don't have a labyrinth, and you want to have that meditative moment. So I'm going to show you how you can do it. So if you lift up your hand, raise your hand, okay, and then get your pointer finger ready. Pointer finger's ready? Pointer finger's ready. You got your hand, you got your pointer finger. Okay, take your pointer finger and put it kind of on that, I don't quite know what it's called, the fleshy part of your palm by your thumb, okay? Wow. Delightful. Lovely. That, yes. Okay, so, and you take your finger and you go up and you kind of circle all the way up around your palm. You're circling up around your palm. Imagine that as part of the labyrinth. So then you're at the bottom of your hand, and then you go up and back again, a little bit of a smaller arch, until you're back again at the bottom of your palm. And then you take your finger again, and you make an even smaller arch, and you go around, and then pretty soon, maybe you do that one more time, and then you're at the center of the labyrinth. In some labyrinths, the center is very, very small, and it is something that only maybe like one or two people can fit into if it's a walking labyrinth. But at my favorite labyrinth, the center is really, really big, and there is a bunch of benches. And you can sit with people in those benches, and you can talk. You can talk about your joys and your sorrows. You can talk about your love for each other. You can talk about things that are really, really hard. And so I like to think that together we can be at the center of the labyrinth. Because the beautiful thing about our faith is that it promises us that we are never alone, that we can always be together in this center of the labyrinth. Our faith definitely does not promise us easy answers. That is not something that Unitarian Universalism promises us. And that is sometimes really scary. But it does promise us that we can be right in the center together. And I am really grateful for that. And I'm grateful to all you for being in the center of the labyrinth with me. So let's take a big breath together, find your center, take a big breath, and may we always, always know that we are never alone. And now, you're going to sing hymn 413, Go Now in Peace, as our children and youth go to Sunday school.
Beloveds, this is the time that we share our community's prayers with one another, the prayers that are on our hearts. You can submit your joys and sorrows online. There were no online submissions this morning, or in this book, which is kept in the rear of the sanctuary until the service begins. We have a prayer of concern from Kathy M. My dear friend Laverne is back in the hospital with cancer. Thoughts and prayers are appreciated for Laverne. We hope that a burden shared is lessened at least a little bit, and we share our joys and thanksgivings because we hope that they will lift all hearts, even if only a little. And we have 2 thanksgivings this morning. From Nat, who says, thank you for the opportunity to perform at the open mic, and to the performers who also shared their talents, and thanks for the youth group for their concessions. In other words, thank you everybody who made last night a success. And Tom also says, thank you to all that participated last night at the open mic, amazing talent in the church. So we give thanks for community things. We light one more candle for all those prayers that remain in the silence of our hearts, some that we have not even been able to put words to yet ourselves. Beloveds, let's take a moment of silence for the prayers that are shared and those that have been spoken, and then we're going to share a special kind of prayer together. This morning, I'm going to share with you an embodied prayer, a body prayer that we can all do together. Now, you do this with a partner, and for those of you at home, if there's somebody with you, you can do it with the person who's with you, and if you're alone and on Zoom, you can turn your camera on and pick one other person and put your word in the chat. Your word, you'll find out just a moment. So this is what we're going to do. You pick one partner, and if we have an odd number of people, if there's somebody, you can do 3. If we do 3, you go, like take a step to the left. You know what I mean? Okay. And Rupal and I are going to demonstrate this together. This is not going to involve a lot of talking. In fact, it's critical. You're going to say one word to each other. It's critical that you just say your word and nothing else, because otherwise we interfere with other people who are trying to do this in silence. So you face your partner. Hello, partner. And you think about where you are right now in relationship to the divine, however you understand that to be, which might just, another name for the divine is love, right? We hold love at the center. So where you are in relation to the divine, and say one word, not a sentence, one word of where you are in relation to the divine. So you might say, searching, or angry, or held, or guided. One word. And take a pose that illustrates that. So, Rupal, I'm going to say, loved. And what's your word? I don't know.
I guess I will say guided.
Guided, okay, and take a pose that would say guided. Okay, so I'm going to take Rupal's pose, and Rupal's going to take my pose, and we're going to pray for each other silently on that word. So we're going to do that now. So find a partner, and you may sit or stand, however you're comfortable. And at home, same thing. Put your word in the chat if there's nobody with you. We're going to say one word, and then we're going to be quiet. There's way too much talking. One word. Still too much talking. There should be no sounds. Good. Amen. Beloveds, did you like that prayer? Some of you maybe not. Okay. But that's a different way to do it. I invite you now to join in singing hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Our first reading this morning is from the Quran, 11:114. Establish regular prayers at the two ends of the day and at the approaches of the night. For those things are good, remove those that are evil. This is a word of remembrance to those who remember. Our second reading this morning is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verse 38-41. Luke is the latest of the synoptic Gospels, that is Mark, Matthew, and Luke. This story is unique to Luke. Pastor Madelyn is going to tell it to us.
As Jesus and his disciples were traveling, Jesus entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him as a guest. She had a sister named Mary who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to all that he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. And so she went to the Lord and asked, "Don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." Jesus answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." I think this is the first time I've told a sacred story to this congregation, yeah? So you might have noticed that I took my shoes off. Yeah, I take my shoes off. It's kind of become a spiritual practice for me. I do it for two reasons. When I took biblical storytelling in seminary, my professor always told stories. She always tells stories in bare feet. She said because she was standing on holy ground, and I liked that. There was a practical reason as well. I took it as a summer school class, and most of the time I was wearing flip-flops. And anybody who's done any kind of performance work knows that moving around and doing exercises is really hard in flip-flops. But I liked the idea, I think of it when I'm telling sacred stories as that I'm standing on holy ground. And so if I'm able, I take my shoes off when I tell. It has become in itself a spiritual practice. But friends, what is a spiritual practice? I'm reading a book now called The Sabbath Way by Travis West. He's a professor of Hebrew and Hebrew Bible at a seminary that it says on the book, but I don't have my reading glasses on, so I can't tell you what seminary that is. He was the keynote speaker at the Network of Biblical Storytellers International Conference in August. And in The Sabbath Way, he says, Sabbath is the most ancient of all spiritual practices. Woven into the fabric of creation, we tend to reduce spiritual practices to, quote, doing devotions, unquote. Essentially, a 10-minute add-on to life that we squeeze in whenever we can make it fit. But Sabbath is not an add-on to life. It is life's core organizing principle. Ooh. Spiritual practice as our core organizing principle. In the epistles, epistle is just a fancy liturgical or church word for letter. Right? In Paul's letters, I think it was to the Thessalonians, but you know, you can fact check me on this later. Paul says, pray without ceasing. I don't think he meant just stay inside the church all the time reciting prayers. I believe he meant live your life as a prayer. Sabbath at the core of what we do. Live your life as a prayer. That would mean everything we do has meaning, has a purpose, there is intention. Nothing is a throwaway. Ooh. We can get there. I believe spiritual practice requires intention and attention. Almost anything can be a spiritual practice. But sometimes we throw away words and phrases. You know, there are a lot of throwaway words in our language, yeah? And maybe you have your pet peeves about certain ones. Spiritual practice demands that we have intention and attention. So we don't have throwaway words, we don't have throwaway practices. I hear people say, oh, my spiritual practice is going walking in the woods. It might be, but you might just be saying, I like to go walk in the woods, so I'm calling it my spiritual practice. What makes it a spiritual practice? Paying attention. Not just being out on a walk and saying, oh, this is nice, I'm glad I went out today. But how am I connecting to what is holy through this? I'm not saying don't go out for a walk because it's a nice day. I'm saying if you're calling it a spiritual practice, how is it then connecting you to what is holy? How is it helping you in the core of your life? When I was in seminary, there was one year that I made all the communion bread for the seminary. You know how that happened? Some of you have heard this story. I was on the worship committee team, right? And we had a chapel elder. As a Methodist seminary, there was a method to everything. There was a chapel elder. And we were having our big beginning of the year meeting, to talk about the year ahead. And I kind of flippantly said, can we have good communion bread this year? Because we'd had pita bread the year before, and we did communion by intinction. So you dip it in the wine. And let me tell you that prepackaged pita bread dipped in wine, not really great. So I said, can we have good communion bread this year? And the chapel elder looked right at me and said, sure. Are you going to make it? I guess so. I guess I just volunteered, because that's how that works too, right? And so I started making the communion bread. Well, the first time I made it after my class that ended at 9 o'clock, so I didn't get home until 9:30, and then I'm making a yeast bread, and that takes time to, I just wanted to get it done. And then a friend sent me a recipe for Luther Seminary communion bread. Friends, this is such tasty bread. I can't even, if you're gluten-free, forget it. But if you can eat gluten, Luther Seminary communion bread, look it up. It takes 30 minutes. And so every Tuesday morning before chapel, I was making this bread. And at first, I'm following the directions. But eventually, making the bread itself became a spiritual practice for me. I didn't even realize it was happening. How did it become a spiritual practice? Because of how I was thinking about what I was doing and what I was doing it for. And it became a prayer. And it linked to communion. Now, for me, it was so special, and it linked to communion because I'd score the bread, because you're supposed to score it, and then I'd wait for, there's a moment in the communion in a Christian sacrament called the fracture, when the bread is broken, and I'd wait for that moment because I knew I'd scored the bread, and I was waiting for it to fracture perfectly. And that was a weekly spiritual practice for me. But it didn't start out that way. What I'm saying is there's hope. It doesn't have to start out that way. I know we have some knitters here, and probably crocheters. Yeah. I served a church where there was a prayer shawl ministry. And you could make stuff on your own, but often they would come together and do it together. And you could just make a thing and it not be a spiritual practice, and it still be a very important gift. But together, they would do things like think about the person it was going to, make a prayer out of it. Then it becomes a spiritual practice, yeah? Now, I have found in times of stress in my life, sometimes it's been hard for me to keep to a spiritual practice. Has anybody ever had a spiritual practice and then found that you were just too overwhelmed to do it? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. But what I've learned recently is that these are the times we need to double down on our spiritual practices. Now, if a particular practice is no longer working for you, what should you do? Change it, let it go, find something else. When I was a child, my maternal grandparents were Orthodox Jews. And so the Sabbath was enforced upon me. Now, I loved going to synagogue with my grandfather. Usually on Saturday mornings, it was just my grandfather. Sometimes my grandmother went. And I was little, so I got to go into the men's section with him. I still love when the Torah comes around and I could kiss it. But the rest of Sabbath with my grandparents, can I color? No, it's Shabbat. Can I watch TV? No, it's Shabbat. Well, can I write? Nope, it's Shabbat. You can read, you can go outside for a walk, but it felt like a huge restriction to me because it wasn't my spiritual practice. It was my grandparents, and I bet they got a lot out of it. I did not. If it's not working for you, if you don't understand it, if it starts to feel like a chore, it's not the right time for that practice. Now, one practice that I preached about for a long time and then finally decided I ought to do, it's said that we preachers, we preach the sermons we need to hear. I started keeping a gratitude journal. Does anybody here keep a gratitude journal? A few. And have you heard of this before, those of you who don't? Every night, I write down in my gratitude journal what I am grateful for today. And I created my own rule for this. I've decided I must have at least 3 things. And friends, some days, you know, I am digging deep down to find anything I am grateful for today. But it has changed me. And it has made other spiritual practices easier. Because because I've been doing it for a few years now, I find that in the middle of the day, when things are going wrong, it's easier for me to switch into that place of gratitude. Whew, boy. At least I broke my left foot so I can still drive my car. True story. It makes me a happier person overall because I don't spend as much time. I'm not saying bad things never happen, they happen. I'm not spending as much time in that difficult place. And as the world has gotten harder, I have personally found digging deeper into spiritual practices has helped. There is a saying, if you have time, pray for an hour. If you do not have time, pray for 2. I make time every day to do the things that are my spiritual practices. And our reading from the Quran this morning tells us this, right? Pray because the good things help the bad things go away. Pray, do this every day. Do this twice a day. And I reflect upon Martha and Mary. I love Martha, oh my goodness. I love her and I can relate. I can relate to Mary too, but I can relate to Martha because have you ever been that host? Everything's not perfect. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. We're running out of coffee. Oh no, we have to, I thought I had more hors d'oeuvres than this. Oh, I forgot that you were allergic to peanuts. I'm sorry, I don't have any other nuts. Oh no. And you know when we're that kind of host, we make our guests anxious. You know that, right? If you've ever been the guest of that host, you know that you spend all your time saying, it's fine, relax, it's fine, let me help you. But Martha can't help it. She wants everything to be perfect for Jesus. And the scripture uses the word distracted twice. She's not doing these things with intention. You can be the host with intention. You can wash the dishes as a spiritual practice, yeah? If you do it with intention. And not to get it done, but to do the task. But Martha is not doing this with intention and attention. She is worried and distracted. And Jesus doesn't admonish her. I see him as inviting her. Mary is doing what Mary needs to do. Martha is distracted. How can we not be distracted so much in our lives? Well, what spiritual practices do you have? Rupal, you have a spiritual practice, yeah? Why don't you come up and tell us a little bit about it? It's almost like we planned this.
So some of you may have seen me working in what is called an art journal. And it's something that I started when, in full force, when my mother moved in with us. So having a special needs kid and really a special needs mom, it became a way for me to kind of have a break. There was sort of a reprieve from life at that moment. And I remembered that I'd taken a course on Zentangle. Are folks familiar with Zentangle? Yes. So some people are, great. And with Zentangle, it's a creative art, but there's intentionality in it. And it is a process that I appreciate. So you start with gratitude for the time, for the place, for the surface you're going to do the Zentangle on, which involves drawing on a little piece of paper. And you have, so you use a tile. So the tile is small. And on here, you put 4 dots, so you create a structure, and then you create a frame around it. And then within that string, you're marking off the boundaries. I don't know how well you can see this. But then you use a tangle or pattern and you repeat it. So the pattern might be straight lines, circles, whatever it is. And you keep going. You'll notice that on this one, this is where the paper is, but my frame kind of comes down here. So once you start drawing, the idea is to let go of any preconceived notions you may have of art. And so in Zentangle, you have this tiny tile, you have an ink pen, and then you have a pencil with no eraser. Because you only have what you have. What you put on the paper stays on the paper. And this encourages you to embrace mistakes. You know, Allison and I had a book for Dante, Beautiful Oops, is that what it is? And it was one of those things where I learned from it. It reminded me to embrace the mistakes. And in Zentangle, even if you make mistakes, you keep moving, and you can keep going as long as you want to. So first, you start off with the gratitude and appreciation. You make those corner dots in the frame and the structure. And at the end, you do initial and sign. Some people do it directly on the front or on the back. And that is to acknowledge the work and that time that you just spent to intentionally create this design. You take a breath and you admire what you've done. And what took me a while was that inner critic. and to quiet that inner critic, because it is a beautiful oops. We can embrace our mistakes. So I encourage you to look at zentangle.com. It is copyrighted, so we couldn't use it here, but it's something that I have received a lot of joy from doing. And over time, from Zentangle, I just started using the art journal to make things. Marianne Orlando had a blue Buddha, or a Buddha that she had put on the chancel last year. And so I drew it at one point and painted it. So whatever sparks you, it might bring you some peace and some joy too.
Thank you, Rupal. So spiritual practices can be physical, they can be artistic, they can be entirely mental, right? We can think about things. In fact, we're going to do a spiritual practice in a bit. We might read. There are all kinds of devotionals. I have a few here that I brought. I work through different things and devotionals at different times. This one is called For Such a Time as This, an emergency devotional by Hannah Reichel. I found it useful and informative. This is by Reverend Carlton Elliott Smith. He's a UU minister. It's called Try My Jesus. He goes through the Gospels, and he's got a year's worth of Gospel readings and his take on it and a little prayer, if you're interested in that. But, there are all kinds of devotionals in many different faith traditions, and you can make your own. But today, I thought, and labyrinths, right? Labyrinths are a single path in and a single path out. We did one on our hands today, and there are outdoor labyrinths and indoor labyrinths. There's prayer, but I thought we'd try some Lectio Divina this morning. I know Reverend Aaron has talked here about Lectio Divina before, and I think probably taught it with you. And you can do this with many different readings. It started in the Catholic Church, but we can adapt, and so we're going to do this in a minute. Why are we doing it? Because it helps us to live out our faith in the world. We do these things with intention and attention, so it helps us to live out our faith in the world, to live your life as a prayer. And it helps us to keep from losing hope, friends. It helps us to keep from losing hope in really tough times. So would you like to do a little Lectio Divina right now? So this is what we're going to do. I have a spiritual practice. One of my many spiritual practices is I read through the Psalms. I read usually an entire psalm, sometimes if it's a really long one, a piece of a psalm every day, but I read the Psalms every day. This is the psalm I read this morning. It happens to be super short, and so it works for our purposes here. This is Psalm 117. I'm going to read it one time. Listen to it. See if anything jumps out at you. We're going to hold silence for a little bit. I'm going to read it a second time, and whatever jumped out at you, a word or a phrase, hang on to that, meditate on that, think about that as I read it the second time. Then we'll be silent for a little bit, and then when I read it the third time, think about how that phrase is connecting you to the divine. What are you being called to do through that? Clear enough? Okay, beloveds, this is Psalm 117. Take a physical attitude that is most comfortable for you for this. Praise the Lord, all you nations. Extol God, all you peoples, for great is God's steadfast love toward us, and the faithfulness of Lord endures forever. Praise Lord. Praise Lord, all you nations. Extol God, all you peoples. For great is God's steadfast love toward us, and the faithfulness of Lord endures forever. Praise Lord. Praise Lord, all you nations. Extol God, all you peoples. For great is God's steadfast love toward us, and the faithfulness of Lord endures forever. Praise Lord. Amen. Beloveds, whatever came up for you in this, I encourage you to share if you wish during coffee hour. The rabbis tell us when we're praying and meditating, whatever comes up, whatever bubbles up in our thoughts, that's fine. That's what needs to be there at that moment. Let it happen. So whatever came up for you, feel free to share. I hope you will dig into some spiritual practices. If you have questions about what spiritual practices, a way to start this, please come talk to me. I'm happy to talk to you about different ways of doing things and what devotionals are out there and all the other ways we might bring intention into our lives. Beloveds, namaste. And now, stewardship of our congregation and of the community beyond is also a spiritual practice, if done with intention and attention, yes? You may give cash or checks in the offering plates as they come around, or you may use the QR code in the pews, and that will take you to our online giving platform. However you give, whatever you give, the offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you, Bell Choir, for that beautiful musical offering. Ushers, come forward. I invite you now to join in dedicating the offering. The words are in your order of service. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these, our offerings. Amen. Thank you. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing our final hymn, number 89, Come My Way, My Truth, My Life. Go in peace, go in love, go with intention and attention. Go always in the footsteps of the holy. Amen. And now we extinguish our chalice flame. For our worship has ended and our service begins.